children, our grandchildren, and even their kids. That's what we'll discuss with my exceptional guests straight after this video. All right, without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage Nisreen Elsaim. She's the chair of the UN Secretary General Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change. She's also an environmental and climate activist. Welcome to Next. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'd like to welcome Neeshad Shafi. He is the co-founder and executive director of the Arab Youth Climate Movement in Qatar. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'd now like to welcome Melati Wijsen. She is the founder of Bye Bye Plastic Bags and YOUTHTOPIA. She has spoken on world stages, including TED and the United Nations. And last but not least, Xiye Bastida. She is a climate justice activist, and she is an advocate of centering frontline communities in the climate movement, and she's the co-founder of the Re-Earth Initiative. Thank you all for joining us here today at Next, organized by the TRT World Forum. It's a pleasure to have each and every one of you with us. Now, as we know, the climate crisis is quickly turning into a climate catastrophe. If not, it is a climate catastrophe at the moment. And time is of the essence because we're already late in taking the necessary steps to secure a brighter and better future for the generations to come. Collective action, as we would all agree, is key. And we need countries like China, India, and members of the EU, the United States, to get on board, and not just by making pledges at summits like COP26, by actually putting those pledges into action so we can see real change happen. From when the summit was held last year, COP26, what's your take on the time in between? Do we see any change that has happened? Let's start with you.
Well, Glasgow started with a lot of positive notes, but I think some of the good outcomes would be derailed with the current Russia-Ukraine crisis, because it's back to the energy systems. The commitments which was made may be derailed if the promises which is done at COP26 are not taken up seriously. The transition, energy transition, has to be done now. You cannot still wait on fossil fuel industries to run our industries in our countries. So I think whatever positives we got from COP26 might have been derailed, but we hope the upcoming COP in Sharm el-Sheikh later in Egypt would be all about loss and damages, which is, and the climate fund ambitions, which is crucial for countries in the Middle East and North Africa and elsewhere in Asia and other places. But I think at the moment the commitments are more like what you mentioned, only on the words and papers.
Mm-hmm. Nisreen, I want to cross now to you because you spoke at COP26 and you held up a sign that wrote 47%. Talk to us about what that means to our audience here, because you made a really crucial statement that world leaders needed to really open their ears to.
Do you talk about the part where I said I won't selfie with them? If they didn't do go, they will delete it? Or the other part? It was like, how can you tell head of states that you will delete their selfie? But this is the truth. Not only me, but the history will actually delete everyone who's on the wrong side. Because unfortunately, this is something we cannot actually bear the burden of it. We cannot really bear the cost of not doing climate action. But the 47% was an instant idea, so it wasn't part of my speech or plan. Wow. Because I felt so lonely in that room. And they also give me the look of, oh, the youth activist, the youth speaker. Because unfortunately, there is a stereotype in all of the conferences where they have all of the high-level speakers, and they have one or two young speakers to just give a flavor to the session, as if we are a decoration or something like this. So I want to send the message that I might be the only person in that room, just because the room capacity is small. Doesn't mean that I'm the only person who is standing behind that. And I might be one person, but I present a huge population of the world, which is 47%. And when I was talking about 47%, it was the young people who are aged between 19 and 30. I feel a bit old to talk about the people who are 15 to 19, so I didn't count them. And I hopefully also feel younger than the people who are between 30 and 35, so I didn't also count them.
Right.
But if we count the whole population between 15 and 35, it's actually more than 61%. So we are the most population of the world, and unfortunately the most population is run by the less population, who are taking all of the wrong decisions that we, the most population, will have to actually deal with, and we are dealing with it right now.
100%. Melati, let me cross to you. After COP26 took place, there was this notion that world leaders are now on board. They're doing the right thing. They're making these big pledges that we haven't seen happen in previous summits. What was your takeaway from the summit?
Yeah, so I actually was not at COP26 physically, but I did do an IG Live with Xiye, who was there, so I'm sure she can give a different perspective. But COP26 started, even before I was born. It was the 26th conference, and I think that not enough change is happening. I think that notion happens after every single COP. After every single COP, there's a little bit of that momentum being built, a little bit of a news flash here, a press conference here, a viral article, or a great video of someone saying the right thing. But how do we actually implement what is being discussed in a four-wall conference into the outside? How do we take what we discuss or world leaders discuss in that room, in that moment, and implement that 365 days of the year? And I think what it starts with is that we don't have enough representation or diversity within those rooms in the first place. That's why when all of us young change makers attend events like that, we like to take people who are not there physically and bring them in. And I think that's what we were able to do through the IG Live and through many different collaborations.
What was your take from it?
Well, just like you were here, I spoke at the end of the World Leaders Summit, which is the first day where the presidents and heads of states of the world speak. And I was the only youth at the time as well, because they only have one youth at a time. That's their thing. And when I went up to tell my speech, all the heads of state had left the room. And obviously, they are busy, they have schedules, there's security issues, but they couldn't stay 5 extra minutes to listen to the next generation. They couldn't stay for me to tell them, by 2050, I'm gonna be 48 years old, and I'm gonna be seeing the world that you're negotiating right now. And because there's not that connection in messaging, we are missing a crucial step in those emotional connections that will never be the same as the business case or the political case. Because when I look at adults in the eye, I want to tell them that I don't want to be scared of my future, that I don't want to see 1.2 billion climate refugees by 2050. I don't want to see 19% of the world being uninhabitable by 2070. These are the things that we're dealing with when we are learning about the climate crisis. For us, it is not something that we're just passionate about. It's something that we're scared of, and we're doing everything we can to bring it into every single room. And everyone has the responsibility to make the climate crisis part of their agenda, part of their every life, and not just get points for mentioning it. So when we say we need climate justice, we mean migration justice, we mean youth justice, we mean racial justice, because these are the things that we're dealing with, and it's an all-encompassing issue.
Yes, can I get a round of applause for that? That deserves a round of applause. That definitely
Let's
does.
do something different. So I will say, what do we want? We all say climate justice. And then I say, when do we want it? We say now. Agreed?
All right. We're all on board?
Let's shake the room. Ready? What do you want?
Climate justice.
No, not enough. Come on, guys. We can do it. Come on. We can do it. Ready?
Let's make some noise.
What do we want?
Climate justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Climate justice.
When do you want it?
Now.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, Melati, let me continue with you. You've started your activism from quite young age. You were 12 years old. You started Bye Bye Plastics. I watched a video where you said when you started this movement in Bali, you had never heard of the word change maker or activist. when you were becoming just that, as you were taking these steps and fighting for your future. You also mentioned some of the struggles you had to overcome to reach the goals you set for yourself. What are some of the hurdles that you've had to come over and tackle throughout the years?
Yeah, I think there are many things that I can mention here, but for the sake of conversation, when I started at 12 years old, we had no business plan or strategy, but we did have a clear vision and a goal. Aside from some of the, I think, very similar struggles or challenges that many young changemakers have, whether that's access to resources or access to mentorship, access to invitations and platforms, the biggest challenge and frustration is that change is not happening fast enough. And I think that's exactly the opening question as well, COP26. How many more conferences, how many more meetings, how many more cleanups until we really get the change we want to see implemented? I think that was always the biggest challenge, and that's where thinking outside the box and creativity, long-term persistence, because this has been a 10-year journey now. So I think for me, it's the challenge is where that change is not happening fast enough, and that we have to understand that this is a lifelong journey. It's not coming from a place of a hobby or a passion, but that this is something that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm. As all of you have been in this journey of fighting and being an activist really for climate action and climate change and really bringing attention to this very crucial subject, I want to ask all of you really if you guys have hope that anything will change as long as these world powers that don't take this issue very seriously as we'd like them to. Do you really have hope, Nisreen?
Well, it's complicated because having hope without having realistic goals, it means that you are illusioning. So let's have a huge differentiation between illusioning and hope, okay? Hope have to have goals, targets, milestones. If you are not reaching these targets, if you are not reaching these goals, if you are not reaching your milestones, then this is not called hope. It's called illusioning. And why I'm saying this is because it was your first COP? COP 22nd, okay. Welcome to the club. It was my 7th.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and I did also different kind of activism. So I started as an activist with civil society, and I moved to a negotiator. Then I noticed that being in the room of negotiation is not enough. You need to influence the high level. So now I'm doing this Secretary General Advisor Group. And then I noticed that even UN is somehow very neutralized and in not having enough restrictions. And that's simply because UN is owned by member state, not the opposite. A lot of people think UN should do this, UN can do that, which is not true, because the UN is formulated from member state. They cannot take member states into account. Well, actually, the opposite happens. Member states can account UN because they fund the UN, they run UN, they send delegates to UN. So it's actually what happens in your member state. It's what's influenced the UN, not the opposite. And a lot of people doesn't know this information. So then we moved from high-level UN to high-level member states, like head of states and discussions with ministers and stuff like this. And doing this activism in all of these levels, different levels and different backgrounds. I'm a physicist, so my background is science. I should be doing modeling, I should be doing, but I noticed also that there's a huge lack of communication between scientists and politicians. And unfortunately, instead of what the science say, what the politicians say happen. So also
that became very clear during the COVID-19 pandemic as well, mind you.
Everything. So doing a little bit of political activism also started to become very important. It's very clear to me right now that we need to have milestones. And just to comment on what you mentioned about the pledges that countries made at COP27. So India, for example, although I hate to put the focus on developing countries like India and China, because we are talking about historical responsibility. India Prime Minister said they will go carbon neutral by 2070. I met him in a session and he said, I want to ask you a question. He said, yes. I said, will you be here in 2070? He looked at me and he said, no, I don't think so, probably, doing the math. He said, why are you promising something where you are sure you will not be here for. So for me, what actual bridges will be like 5 years plans, 5 years strategies maximum, because this is the longest, I'm talking about the democracies, but this is the longest normally time or period the president stay.
Right. Let me cross to Neeshad now. You do a lot of your activism work in the Middle East. You are the executive director of the Arab Youth Climate Movement in Qatar. Give us some insight into how this subject is approached in the Middle East and why we tend to not see or hear from the youth in that part of the world.
Well, absolutely. That was a necessity why we even started the Arab Youth Climate Movement. Lack of representation. We have a lot of young people, like Melati was mentioning, in our part of region with amazing plans, knows a lot about negotiation, what are the stakes for each countries. But there are not enough platforms for them to do. And they're quite lost in many of the climate conversation, which is huge, unless you really understand the negotiation skills and what are at stakes, and follow up some of the key parts, not to be a jack of all trades. And on top of that, the region, as you know, goes through a lot of civil wars and stuff, where young people feels that having a job and employment is more important than climate change. But not knowing that the climate change would exacerbate in a way that you will even lose existing jobs. So in a way, our young people are also far from the realities of climate change, and we're actually waiting for a catastrophe to come. I'm sure Turkey had a forest fire. You can look at it in a different way. It was man-made, or it was have to do with extreme summer you had, and also the extreme winter you had this year in Istanbul.
Right.
It was snowing. I don't know. It was snowed in Istanbul for years. It's not new. The extreme weather events are coming very close. What to take more? Temperature. Take temperature itself is the basic thing. 2 degrees Celsius anywhere in the world, +2 to the Middle East. Are we aware of these critical aspects of climate change? No. Are the young people given the platform? No. Are they funded enough or resourced? No. So many of the young people don't realize this, and they feel like else people will take care of it. And also, it's also a responsibility of our global North youth movements to consider young people from the region. This is also sometimes, I personally believe sometimes the whole climate movement, youth climate movement is whitewashed. Whereas the Greta Thunberg of the Middle East, everybody in the Middle East are Greta Thunberg. But they just focus on a couple of names and faces, and they're not going to save the world. We need more young people to come in the climate conversation. They have to give them a platform. So that was the idea with the Arab Youth Climate Movement. We tried to bring those platforms, so get to know about climate negotiation, what is at stake for each country. So over the years, we thought this will replicate in other countries, and we are trying to do that through our organization. But definitely, I know there are a lot of young people here in Turkey and in the Mediterranean region and the Middle East and North Africa who are doing extremely great works. Are they recognized? No. Does the media find them on the top of 100 influential? No. Because they always look at West, either at the climate summit. It's America and other big countries who decides the fate of the rest of the world. I think that has sometimes resonated or trickled down to youth movement also, like they're going to save our world. Either you join the whole North movement or you are doomed. No. I want the representation from that region, and they share their stories. And representation is key.
It is key. Do you agree with him and the fact that there are divisions with even in an area where we're trying to save our planet? We're trying to take better steps into saving our planet, but along the way, do you think that there's discrimination?
Yeah, I'll tell a short story just to showcase how this plays out in the activism world. So I'm from Mexico in a small town called San Pedro Tultepec, and my town is 10,000 people. I'm indigenous, my name is Rain. In Otomi, you know, I come with values that my dad taught me that are values of reciprocity. We take, but we must also give back. Intergenerational cooperation, community rather than competition. So these values are values that I bring with me to my work. So when I see this, you know, picking youth out of the climate movement and showing them into media, and not only that, but erasing their stories, erasing their experiences, that is what we need to call out. So the media has actually called me the Greta Thunberg of the US many, many times, until I wrote an op-ed saying, you cannot do that because she has an experience that I don't have, and I have an experience that she doesn't have. So it's about recognizing that each of us have different stories to tell. Those stories need to be told, and that is what's going to make our movement not only look as big as it is, but also inviting for people. So yes, the climate movement has all of these things that get shown and not shown, but at the end of the day, the important thing is that it's growing, it's getting stronger, it's getting bigger, and it's not about changing who you are to be part of the movement, but realizing that everything that you do can be part of the solution.
I think, can I just jump in
Of
there?
course, yeah, go ahead.
It's so relevant because I think that lots of the talks that we heard about today were about the metaverse, about social media. All of these different tools are at the fingertips. It's what we grew up with as Gen Z. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and what we see happening is that we're recognizing and celebrating every way to be a change maker, right? Hands up if you know Greta Thunberg. Hands up high. Greta Thunberg, keep your hands up higher so I can see them. A 360. I don't have eyes in the back of my head, but let's see. Okay, keep your hands up if you know, for example, Mohammed Al-Junde. Keep your hands up if you know Memory Banda. Keep your hands up if you know Renee Silva. So point here is that we do know 1 or 2, 10 young change makers, but do your homework. Go after this session and make a challenge for yourself to learn about 10 new change makers that haven't made it onto Time magazine or Forbes 30 Under 30. Challenge yourself, because it is up to us to make sure that these stories and that these voices are being heard. And out of curiosity, who here feels like they are a change maker or that they can create change? Let's see those hands. Higher.
And now everybody go up.
And now everybody. And how many of you feel like you're a change maker or want to create change but don't necessarily know where and how to start? So a little bit more hands come up here, and that's also part of the problem. Other than having our stories heard or having our stories put out there in a very busy world, a lot of us are stuck with where and how do we create change. And that's a big reason why I think that our education systems, our media, needs to start changing and creating an inviting way so that everybody feels like they can be involved. The journalists, the storytellers, the artists, and the public speakers, we all have a role to play.
Right, it's interesting that you mentioned our education system, because they play a crucial role in teaching the younger generations about the catastrophic world that they may be left face to face with in a decade or 2 from now. How is that received in the Middle East? I mean, is the necessary awareness being done? I know your organization is doing a lot, but we know that COP27 is actually going to be held in Egypt this year, if I'm not mistaken. Is that a way of bringing awareness into the region of the climate crisis?
Well, I mean, such events, huge events, can be a precursor.
We can't hear you.
I think it might be on now.
Well,
No.
Mikrofonları kontrol edebilir miyiz lütfen?
so I think it can be a precursor for starting that discussion, but unless the young people are part of that discussion, that's a different story. So I hope, even at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh later this year, and in Abu Dhabi next year in the United Arab Emirates, it's quite an opportunity for young people from the region to showcase their great work and bring up all the Greta Thunbergs in the Middle East. I mean, I think it's an opportunity. So I hope but some of the questions Melati asked, I just want to ask, how many climate activists do you know in Turkey?
Come on, guys. You
Do you
must know one or
I know more than 7 activists in Turkey.
I know one.
Yeah.
Nobody in the media, but I know them personally because of their small work they do in their community, in their village, from Ankara to Istanbul.
And
So-
also from the Turkey pavilion at COP. By the way, Turkey have one of
Wonderful,
the biggest and most beautiful pavilions at COPs.
Yeah,
normally.
absolutely. So these are the opportunities for them to be highlighted through their government initiatives or platforms like ours, where we try to bring those young people to the limelight, because not just we want all the youth together, but they're doing extremely great work, either in a sustainable way of doing academic study, sustainability ideas on changing the business model, or even the transportation sector. There's a lot to do there. And of course, our young people are not just educated, they're engineers and doctors, and so health is one of the areas where young people can work on. There's another area on engineering where a lot of climate science is something that everybody has to learn. And having science background is a critical way to go forward. So I think these two events in the Middle East can be a precursor so that the whole climate youth movement in the Middle East can get a big push-up. And all those young people are highlighted and given the due, I say, honor, because they've been doing a great lot of work. And they are not here to be on time 100. They just want to make sure that their ideas are replicated and help to their community and their country. So I think this could be a real precursor if it is taken the right way and given the young people their due platform to showcase their work and talents at these summits. If not, it will be at another club and people will be look after what's happening after UAE.
Yeah,
Right.
but I think also, if I can jump here, it's different for different perspectives. For example, for the African perspective, it's a little bit different than the MENA region. Why? Because many of the MENA region countries are, their economy is based on oil and gas. So there is somehow a conflict inside of the person, because it's not easy to lose the privilege you have. Imagine if we woke up one day and we discover that we cannot use cars anymore at all. It's not an easy change, and people might be very much, how can I say it, perfect and
Comfortable.
perfect and I mean to say idealistic, and say yes, we will do everything for climate change. We are ready to do everything, but the moment they lose the privileges they have, things will change. It's not easy. I understand that, but. While we are enjoying the privileges that we are having, the lights, for example, this is a stage, for example, let's remember the people who doesn't have any privilege to lose in the first place. And that's why I was participating in one of the sessions at the Expo, and I always challenge the UAE government with this discussion. And the lady asked me, Nisreen, what are you ready to give up for climate change? I said, who told you I have something to give in the first place? And I wasn't talking to about myself, to be honest. I have a lot of privileges, and I'm very grateful for that. But I was talking about the communities that I represent who doesn't have anything to lose, or actually anything to sacrifice with in the first place. For example, the education discussion. In Sudan, we have more than 6 million kids outside the school who are in the age of going to school. And all of you, I just invite you to write schools in Sudan in Google and see the pictures of the schools that even the people who are privileged enough to go to school are going to. And you will see that education is not about quantity only. So it's not the number of people who know how to write and read, but also about the quality. And in many cases, we don't have quality or quantity in our countries and many other African countries. And this is also the discussion I have with Fridays for Future all the time. I say, guys, first of all, Sudan is a country where Friday is a weekend.
Yeah.
Our weekend is Friday, Saturday. And secondly, how can I ask someone who's the first of his village or her village to go to school, to strike from the school that the other kids cannot actually go to?
Have access to.
Exactly. So making the tool that you are using actually for climate activism, making it relevant to the reality that you are living in is very, very, very important. And last thing before I go, the rural communities are actually by far more aware of the problem than us because they are closer to nature. They understand that the wind direction changed. Who knows where is the wind direction in Istanbul, for example, or any big cities? They understand the behavior of the animals, so they think that the animals are nervous, for example. Who understand if the animal is nervous or not in also urban areas. So they know a lot, and they have a lot of indigenous knowledge that we also need to be humble and learn from and develop it and make it in a bigger scale so we can all actually use this indigenous knowledge. Otherwise, we will just have to go back to the Stone Age by force, not by choice.
Right. Now, Xiye, I want to continue with you because your father, actually, you mentioned your father. He's been a big inspiration to you from what I gather, and he says, leave everything better than you found it. Pick up from that quote and tell me how that's resonated with you and how you've implemented that into your works.
Well, yeah, my dad is a big inspiration. He's actually been attending climate conferences since the Earth Summit in '92. That's where he met my mom. So when people see me, they're like, "Oh, you make sense because your family is in the activism movement." And so my dad, he comes from, like I mentioned before, an indigenous community called the Otomi community. And we have a lot of indigenous principles that are shared with most indigenous communities around the world. Even if we don't have contact with each other, the principles are there. And one of them is this principle of recognizing that Mother Earth and humans have a relationship. It's a reciprocal relationship, and we are guests on Mother Earth. And our role should not be to take over, but to take care. And that is a shift in mindset that we have not all adopted. We are in a system where GDP is our measure of success, where linear growth is our measure of success. Sometimes exponential growth is our measure of success. But where's index of happiness? Where's security and health and education? And I think that once we shift our mindset to one of protection rather than conquering, that is when we're going to realize the effects that we're having on Mother Earth and the climate crisis. And it's also going to show us that the climate justice movement is not about amount of carbon in the atmosphere. It's about you and me experiencing joy, because we don't want to be forced to climate violence that is going to be caused by crop failure, by rising sea levels, by wildfires. That is what we're facing. So if we want to preserve that joy and leave this world better than how we found it, we need to be able to connect, we need to be able to tell the truth, and we need to be able to act upon it.
And it's the indigenous communities that are suffering the greatest from the climate crisis at this very moment. Unfortunately, that's all the time I have left. I'd love to continue conversating about this very timely and crucial topic, but I have to wrap. Thank you all very much for joining us here at Next. It was a pleasure hosting each and every one of you. Very insightful information. I know I will go home and reflect on what I've done for this movement to save our planet. And I'm sure everyone else here joining us in this studio and of course online will also go home and reflect, and will look into what they can do and how they can play a role in adding to climate activism and action. Thank you so much all for joining us here today.